Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's meeting of the Assembly Committee on Growth and Infrastructure. Madam Secretary, would you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Brown May. Assemblyman Carter.
Present.
Assemblywoman Dickman. Here. Assemblywoman Gallant.
Here.
Assemblyman Gurr.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama. Here. Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblywoman Miller.
Here.
Assemblyman Miller.
Here.
Assemblywoman Peters. Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Present.
Chair Watts.
And I am here. Please mark Assemblywoman Peters present when she arrives. We do have a quorum. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please silence any electronic devices you may have. If you wish to testify, please sign in at the table in the back of the room and provide a business card if you have one. If you wish to provide public comment, we will have one public comment period at the end of today's meeting. You can find information for public comment on our agendas, which are publicly posted on the Nevada Legislature's website. We're going to ask anyone providing public comment to please limit their remarks to 2 minutes. Everyone, please be sure to clearly state and spell your name before you begin speaking, and then to state your name for the record every time that you speak. We are going to have a little bit of musical chairs in committee today, as I have another bill to present. So I have authorized the vice chair and others to take the gavel as needed while we move forward. Members, on our agenda today, we do have a work session with 3 bills on it and then 2 bill hearings for the day. So with that, we are going to begin with our work session. We'll start with Assembly Bill 192, which establishes provisions relating to wildlife crossings. And I will turn it over to our policy analyst, Mr. Stinisbeck, to lead us through the work session document.
Thank you, Chair. For the record, Jan Stinisbeck with the Research Division of the LCB. As nonpartisan staff, I cannot advocate for any measure, for or against any measure that comes before this body. I was told that we are a little bit under time pressure, so I'm going to move rather quickly through the work session documents. Assembly Bill 112 was sponsored by this committee on behalf of the Joint Interim Standing Committee on Natural Resources and heard on March 9th. The bill creates the wildlife crossing account in the State General Fund and requires NDOT to consult with NDOT to identify locations and strategies related to wildlife crossings and prioritize certain areas to fund projects relating to wildlife crossings. Lastly, the bill requires the Director of NDOT to review the standards and specifications for the design and construction of highways to incorporate wildlife crossings and other related highway features into the highways in the state. In terms of amendments, Assemblyman Watts proposed amendments to define wildlife, require NDOT to consult with grazing permit holders and adjacent private landowners where wildlife crossings would be located to avoid or mitigate impacts on livestock management or private land use. And lastly, replaces issuance of general obligation bonds for $50 million with general fund appropriation of the same amount. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stinisbeck. I'll just note that one change was I did give some reference to in the committee hearing, and so after further conversations with the Treasurer's Office, we decided to change the source of the funds. If this does move forward, it will go to the Ways and Means Committee, where we will further vet the budgetary implications of the measure. So are there any questions on this work session document? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 112. I've got a motion from Assemblyman Carter. I've got a second from Assemblyman Gurr. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. That motion carries unanimously. I'll take the floor statement on that. Thank you very much. With that, we'll move on to the next item on our work session, which is Assembly Bill 195.
Assembly Bill 195 was sponsored by Assemblywoman Hardy, heard in this committee on March 7th, and it requires the DMV to reinstate free of charge a driver's license or provide an original or renewal driver's license to certain persons released from prison. Likewise, it waives the fee for the administration of the examination required for the issuance of a non-commercial driver's license for certain persons released from prison. And lastly, the bill exempts a person whose driver's license expires during a period of incarceration from the penalty for the late renewal of a driver's license. There's one amendment proposed by Senator Hardy, which would additionally waive fees for identification cards for certain persons released from prison. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Stinisbeck. Members, are there any questions on this bill? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 195. Got a motion from Assemblywoman Peters. Do I have a second?
Second.
Take a second from Assemblywoman Dickman. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay? That motion carries unanimously. I'll assign that floor statement to Assemblywoman Hardy. Congratulations, and I think we have another bill, so we look forward to seeing you again soon. With that, we'll move on to the last item on our work session today, which is Assembly Bill 262.
Assembly Bill 262 was sponsored by Senator Watts and heard in this committee on March 14th. It requires, to the extent practicable, state agencies to give preference to the purchase of automobiles that minimize emission and the total cost of the vehicle over its service life. And likewise, it requires state agencies, to the extent practicable, to purchase certain vehicle fluids, motor vehicle fluids. Lastly, the bill requires state agencies to maintain certain records of the type of fuel used by vehicles purchased by the agency. There's one proposed amendment by Senator Watts, which adds a letter of declaration concerning the importance of reducing tailpipe emissions and adds compressed natural gas to a list of fuels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stinisbeck. Members, any question on this work session document? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to amend and do pass Assembly Bill 262. I've got a motion from Assemblyman Miller. Do I have a second?
Second.
I've got a second from Assemblywoman Miller. Any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay?
Nay.
Will the nays please raise their hands? We've got a nay from Assemblywoman Gallant, Assemblyman Gurr, and Assemblywoman Dickman. Thank you. With that, the motion does pass, and I will take the floor statement. All right. Thank you very much, members. That concludes our work session for the day. We are now going to move into our bill hearings, and as I have a bill presentation myself, at this point I'm going to turn the gavel over to our vice chair.
Thank you. I will now open the hearing on Bill number 303, which revises provisions relating to the towing of a motor vehicle under certain circumstances. Assemblyman Miller, you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Vice Chair and fellow members of the esteemed Growth and Infrastructure Committee. Before I begin, I would like to note that I don't anticipate having to use an expert today, but I do have Sophia Romero on the phone lines if there is, in fact, a question or something that I cannot answer. With that being said, I will get started. All right. I should have started here first, right? I am C.H. Miller, representing Assembly District 7 down in southern Nevada in Clark County, and I wish to say it was my pleasure to present this bill today, but I am actually frustrated that I have to be here presenting this bill today. It is one of those bills where you have to do You pass some legislation in a previous session, you find out things aren't being implemented in the way or with the intent that you saw when you put the bill into the universe. And so you have to do what we call cleanup. And so that's what AB 303 is doing. It's aimed at clarifying the intent of Assembly Bill 301, which passed in the 81st legislative session. Now, 301 did a few things. It aimed to do a few things. One, prohibit the non-consent towing of a vehicle from a residential complex or common interest community when the reason for the tow is solely based on registration status. Two, required a tow operator to immediately release a vehicle upon being presented with the appropriate documentation that the vehicle was in fact properly registered at the time of the tow, if the reason for the tow was solely based on registration status. Three, established a 48-hour waiting period from the time the vehicle arrived at the tow yard before a storage fee could be charged when a vehicle was towed solely based on registration status. Four, it directed the NTA to establish a hardship tariff program for those who were faced with economic challenges beyond their control when their vehicle was towed solely based on registration status. AB 301 was necessary because the pandemic exposed what some would consider predatory behavior at a time when Nevadans were at their most vulnerable. In the midst of the pandemic, a time when uncertainty and hard times crippled everyone from government agencies to the services, government agencies and services to everyday lifestyle and culture of every single one of us Nevadans. It also caused what seemed like normal, simple, expedient processes to come to a halt, like the issuing of vehicle registration stickers and decals. During that time, the DMV got pretty far behind with getting those stickers out. And what we discovered is that tow operators were towing properly parked vehicles that were properly registered from apartment communities and common interest communities because they did not have the sticker displayed, a sticker that they simply just hadn't gotten yet. These folks were also faced with having to pay the expensive cost of retrieving their vehicles when they hadn't done anything wrong. Sadly, this was happening more often in communities and census tracts that historically have lower incomes and face criminal and social injustices that exacerbate their economic challenges. Now, while having a vehicle mistakenly towed for some is just a pesky inconvenience, for others it can result in the loss of a job, a day's wages, or the decision to get the car out of the tow yard, or a decision to get the car out of the tow yard, or pay the light bill. The improper and/or predatory non-consent towing of a vehicle can financially ruin many in all of our communities at a time when people's money is funny. Now, that's something that, I channeled my grandfather to pull in, people's money being funny. But at the end of the day, people have economic challenges, and when your vehicle, the one thing that you have that gets you back and forth to work, is towed improperly, it exacerbates your financial issues. So we got AB 301. We worked with the industry to come to an amiable place on that language, and we passed it. However, in the interim, it was brought to my attention that people were still having their vehicles towed based on the registration status alone. Their vehicles were not being released when they showed evidence that it was currently registered at the time of the tow. And they were not being given the 48-hour window to pick up their window without requiring payment. So after hearing that persist from multiple people, there was one constituent that reached out to me directly asking about the law because their vehicle had just been towed. So I offered to take that constituent to retrieve their vehicle. And I saw firsthand how one tow operator chose to interpret the law. For example, rather than releasing the vehicle when presented with documentation that the car was in fact registered, the tow operator said no, that in fact that information had to be presented at the time that the tow truck driver had the car on the hook. When asked about the 48-hour window, as mentioned in subsection 6 of the statute, where it states that an operator shall not charge a storage fee for 48 hours, this operator said, "We aren't charging a storage fee. It's an impound fee." When I offered to the gentleman that the tow was not requested by law enforcement and therefore there shouldn't be an impound fee, I was told I was not the owner of the vehicle, he would not talk to me anymore, and that I needed to leave the property, otherwise he trespassed me and called the police. Now, I'll add to this, the context. This was not a heated argument. This was not a back and forth. Was there intensity because we're both on two opposite sides of the issue? A little bit. But he wasn't aggressive or out of line, neither were we. But I was asked to leave the property or be trespassed. When questioning whether or not you should be charging an impound fee when it was clearly a storage fee, you had changed your intent. You had reinterpreted the law to make it fit what you wanted to do. Now, I'm not saying every tow operator or tow company was doing this or is persisting in this type of behavior, but based on the multiple complaints that I got directly about it, I realized that it was something that needed to be addressed in the statute to clarify what the actual intent is. And so now we're at AB 303, which will do a few things. One, it will keep, and this is the amended version, so on Nellis you should have the amended version of what we are looking to do here. It will keep the original language of subsection 6 of section 3 of section 1 on page 3, which maintains that which maintains what was agreed upon with the industry in the previous bill, AB 301 from the last session. Due to the fast and furious pace, when bills come out, sometimes they don't come out with exactly what you want in them. Sometimes they have more things in them than you expected them to have. So the amendment addresses that specifically and returns, it just restores the original language that is there already as it relates to the 48-hour window. I believe that will address many of the concerns relating to several of the opponents of this particular bill. Two, it also sets forth certain reasons outside of an owner's control for which he or she is determined to be incapable of paying the normal rate charged for the removal and storage of the towed vehicle. So that is the hardship tariff program that the NTA was instructed to stand up. They did that. A lot of this is mirroring what they already have in statute, but then the bill also, with the amendment, expands that option of the hardship tariff to other types of non-consent towing. People whose vehicles are towed, if they're in a financially difficult situation, they're in a financially difficult situation. It doesn't change based on whether it's towed for registration or some other reason. And so, when they meet those particular standards that they're receiving some type of government assistance, different things like that, they should then be also eligible to apply for the hardship tariff program, which I believe the NTA provides a 30% discount to those folks. 4, it clarifies that towing a vehicle solely because the registration of the vehicle is expired is a violation of the requirements of NRS 7064477 and provides that if a vehicle is towed in violation of this provision, the owner of the vehicle is not required to pay any fee for the towing. For that purpose, the amendment proposes to add language to subsection 2C of section 1. So that is clarifying that the vehicle should not be towed and there should not be any fee for a vehicle being towed solely based on registration status when it's in a common interest community or an apartment community. 5, finally, AB 303 provides that if a motor vehicle is towed in violation of the provisions of this bill, or an operator charges a fee when they shouldn't, the operator may be subject to certain penalties. Pretty much what it does is it's enabling language for the NTA to go ahead and investigate and apply the penalties that they think is necessary when a vehicle has been towed for the wrong reasons in this particular section. 2, it also allows the vehicle owner to pursue compensation or lost damages if they did miss a day of work or if they did have additional financial costs as it relates to the retrieval of their vehicle when it was towed improperly based on the existing law that says a vehicle may may not have a vehicle, a tow operator may not have a vehicle towed solely because the registration of the vehicle is expired. That is already in statute. So anytime that that's not followed and a vehicle is towed based on that, it could be considered a not wise thing to do, where people are able to recoup benefits if it had been in a different situation. When you take something that's not yours, unauthorized, there are consequences for that. And so we just want vehicle owners to know that they have a recourse if, in fact, they do suffer a loss based on their vehicle being towed improperly. With that, I will wrap up my comments and stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I do believe we have a couple of questions. Assemblyman Carter.
Thank you for that presentation. My question has got to do with the tariff portion. Does that apply in any way, shape, or form if the tow is done at the direction of law enforcement? Thank you.
All right. Assemblyman C.H. Miller, for the record, no, it does not.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I was wondering if you would happen to know, since the passage of AB 301 last session, how many complaints have been actually filed for registration violations, towing based on just registration being expired or not having a tag?
Thank you. C.H. Miller, for the record. Actually, I do not know how many have been told for that. When the NTA was here, I think I specifically asked that question, and they said that they hadn't seen many, if I remember correctly. But let's also understand that a lot of times when people have their vehicles towed, the extra step of going to pursue, it just requires additional time, right? So they may not, but there are some who will. And if they do decide to pursue, they should have the added benefit that there can be penalties applied on their behalf because they were wronged. But it doesn't mean it's not happening. And I know it's happening because folks come to me directly to say, hey, this is happening, right? I went with someone and saw it firsthand how it was being reinterpreted. So the lack of people following through and actually making the complaint doesn't mean we don't have a problem. Thank you.
Hello? So if some sort of law enforcement, like DMV enforcement or someone, were to confirm that this car was not registered and it was towed, then would this apply?
C.H. Miller, for the record, let me be sure that I understand. You're saying if DMV enforcement were to confirm that the vehicle was not
Registered properly or have
so,
a current tag?
So, based on the statute that currently exists, if the vehicle is not, is not registered currently, it should not be towed based on registration status alone. Now, if the vehicle is parked on top of a fire hydrant, it should be towed. But if it's just based on the registration status of the vehicle, it should not be towed.
So is there any consequence for not having your vehicle registered when you're parked somewhere illegally, or? I have a
C.H.
constituent who harangues me constantly about all the unregistered vehicles, and what are we gonna do about it? I think I've mentioned this in committee before.
Absolutely. The problem is, this is C.H. Miller for the record. So the problem with vehicles being registered and not being registered, the problem with vehicles being registered or unregistered, this is not the penalty for us enforcing vehicle registration, right? This because this doesn't do that. For the most part, if someone's vehicle is not registered, it's more likely an indication of financial hardship or difficulty than it is that they just don't care. I realize that there are opinions and people probably think that they know other folks' financial situation and that they didn't get their car registered because they just don't care about the system. But by and large, that's probably a very small number of folks versus folks who have to pay $500 to $100 to $1,000 to get a car registered and just might not be able to do it. So there is no expectation or there's no expectation to give anybody a pass. It's simply saying, we understand that there are some financial issues. We understand that towing a vehicle is sometimes necessary, but it's not necessary if I'm at home parked in my car in my designated parking spot and my vehicle just happens to not be registered. It's not a safety issue. It's not an issue. It's not even against the law because I'm not driving the vehicle. So my car doesn't have to be registered, and it shouldn't be getting towed from my designated spot if it's properly parked. So this bill specifically focuses on apartment communities and common interest communities where folks are at home with their vehicles, they are parked properly, and the vehicle doesn't have the proper or the current registration at the moment. That's the only reason the vehicle is being towed. We're saying that should not happen. The law already says that should not happen. If they are parked in a red zone, they're parked in the neighbor spot or somewhere else, that vehicle should be towed, period.
Okay, thanks. Could I have one more question on a different part? Thank you. I was just also looking at in section, I think it's section 7, item 4 of under the hardship. So who gets to determine what the necessities of life exceeding income are? I mean, that could be pretty subjective, like, is HBO a necessity of life?
Thank you for the question. Me and this button. C.H. Miller for the record. Thank you for the question. That is something that is able to be determined by the NTA in their investigation and evaluation. They already have established a hardship tariff program. This just aligns with a lot of the provisions within their program just to go ahead and put it in the statute. And then we're also expanding it to other types of tows. So that there is equity in consequence, or more equity in consequence as it relates to non-consent towing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for the indulgence.
Assemblywoman Summers Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Assemblyman Miller, for your presentation. Maybe there's some misunderstanding about these properties, these community interest properties where your bill is narrowly focused. Would you mind just sort of kind of giving us a little breakdown of what types of communities are you specifically speaking of, so that we are all clear? Common interest, I think, is the term that you used.
Yes, thank you for the question, C.H. Miller for the record. So apartment communities, pretty much where there are multiple unit dwellings, where there is designated parking. This will also fall into condo communities, HOA communities. All of that would fall under a common interest community.
Thank you. I was here last year when this bill was originally put forward, and I thought that that was clearly defined. And I also thought that the issue of that it was clearly delineated that this was for cars that were properly parked, not illegally parked. Can you give a little background? I'd love to hear a little bit more about the situation that you ran into with your constituent. Was their vehicle parked in front of a fire hydrant? Was their vehicle blocking someone's driveway? Were they in a red zone? What's the sort of atmosphere or just draw a picture of what happened and how this tow actually went forward?
Thank you, C.H. Miller, for the record. So they live in a common interest community or condo community. They are townhouse style. They have designated parking spaces that are along a wall, and then across the driveway are the actual condo units. And they also have a driveway and a garage. So this particular constituent has a vehicle that's parked in a properly designated parking spot, and simply the vehicle registration did not have the sticker on the car. The current registration was in the car. When we went to the tow yard, they allowed him to go get the registration out of the car to show it, and showed it. But that was literally the only reason that the vehicle was not towed, was that the sticker on the vehicle was not current, but the vehicle was in fact currently registered.
Thank you. Final question. During the last hearing, the hearing last time, there was some discussion, and I thought it was pretty clearly defined that the majority, if not all, tow companies have access to the database that tells them if a vehicle's registration is current. Is that still the case? And if so, did this particular company have the capability of checking to see if that registration was current? And did they explain whether or not they had done that and just chose to tow the vehicle because the sticker wasn't there? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. C.H. Miller for the record. I haven't been on the site in a while, but it is my understanding that if you have the license plate number of any vehicle on the DMV's website, anybody can go to the DMV's website, put in that license plate number, and will know if that vehicle is currently registered or not. Anybody. We can all do it. So to answer that, yes, every tow company or operator has the ability to do that. Whether or not they did it in that case, I do not know. It wasn't a part of the conversation or dialogue that we had.
Assemblywoman Gallant.
Thank you, Chair. And I have to tell you, the worst phone call I get as a property manager is when my tenant's car is towed, because they're really mad at me and I have nothing to do with it, right? So I kind of see like both sides of this, because you're correct. Like, we don't have to have our car registered. It's only if we're actively using it on the road. However, a lot of times in those communities, it's part of their CCNRs that your car is registered. And then sometimes the car parking is not necessarily assigned. It's like open parking. So it's a way for a community to ensure that they don't have a bunch of abandoned vehicles. So I'm kind of playing devil's advocate because it's awful on this side of it, but how do you expect these common interest communities to ensure that like their parking lot and their community stays safe? I mean, I had a stolen car and somebody took it into, like, they stole our car and they took it into a common interest community and they picked it up that way, right? It wasn't on the side of the street. It was a way for it to get back to us. So do you have any solutions on how they manage that portion of it?
C.H. Miller, for the record, thank you for the question. When you say when they manage that part, do you mean how do the property managers or the common interest communities manage having abandoned vehicles on their property?
Well, yeah, and don't put property managers in with common interest. We hate that.
On the record.
Yeah, on the record. So, but I mean, in terms of them ensuring that their community stays, clean and safe and that there's available parking for their residents, part of managing that is ensuring that the cars that are there are supposed to be there. So how do you expect them to manage that within, a common interest community if they're not checking if they don't have registration as sort of like a trigger to follow up on that car?
Thank you for the question. So the way that I understand it is that property overseers,
Fair enough.
that they actually have to sign off on non-consent tows from their properties. So that doesn't allow the tow operators to go out and do it on their own. But in fact, every time that happens, it should be, from my understanding, signed off by the overseer that's authorized to do that on that particular property. If a resident has a vehicle there, I would imagine that they're supposed to, or they're allowed to have that vehicle there. So I don't know how a property would manage that, right? How they would follow up or determine whether or not the vehicle should be there or not. I would suggest that if I am paying rent and a part of my rent includes a parking space, whether it's free parking or designated parking, but that if I needed to place a vehicle there, I should be able to place a vehicle there. I also want to be clear that we already have this in statute, that a vehicle should not be towed based on registration status alone. So we're not debating that issue now, right? That's already the law of the land. So again, I don't know how they would manage that. I'm sure that they are smart enough to figure out what's going to be the best process for their property, considering that they should not be allowing tows to happen on their property solely based on registration status.
I have a feeling their argument is going to be that it's in the CCNRs. So that's just, my guess on that. Another suggestion is that since registration is available to anybody with the driver's license, would it, make sense to maybe put it in statute that it has to be checked prior to towing so that registered vehicles don't? Because during COVID, perfect example, I'm on 200 Lewis Avenue in the parking garage. I didn't get my sticker yet, but it was registered. But the parking meter gave me a ticket because I didn't have that sticker. And even though I showed them it registered, they didn't care. They still made me pay that ticket. And I would think the city of Las Vegas would have access to that as well and could solve that problem as well.
Thank you for the question. So as it relates to that, this does not apply to law enforcement or code enforcement. So if you're out in a public space or if law enforcement requests the tow for whatever their reasons are, that still happens. This is only on private property in these community, common interest communities, that this is even possible. We did look initially when we first did AB 301, we looked at requiring the tow operators to have to check the site prior to. When we got to the Senate side, the bill got amended to just eliminate the possibility of towing based on registration status. So then it became no need to check the DMV record, because if that's the only reason that the car is being towed, it just shouldn't be.
Members, any more questions? I do have one before we close this bill hearing. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you said the NTA. Would you just explain for the record, what is the NTA, and do they have oversight relative to investigations, and can perhaps mitigate maybe a dispute between a tow company and the vehicle owner?
Thank you for the question. I am not an expert on the NTA and what they do throughout, as it relates to specifically mitigating a situation between a vehicle owner and a tow company. I do know that it's the Nevada Transportation Authority, and they have jurisdiction over tow companies, over their tariffs, and applying penalties, violations, investigations, all of that kind of stuff. Once someone files a complaint, it's my understanding that then the NTA looks into that and investigates it and comes up with an outcome based on their structure, right, their penalty structure. That does not also include, to my understanding, it does not include providing compensation at all to a wronged consumer.
Thank you for that explanation. Okay. Hearing no other questions, we will move into testimony in support, opposition, and neutral for Assembly Bill 303. Please remember, if there's anyone in support here in Carson City, please come to the table, or in Las Vegas. Remember to clearly state and spell your name and limit your testimony to 2 minutes. We'll be timing each speaker as we move through this process. Okay, seeing no one here in Carson City in support, no one in Las Vegas in support. Oh, we do have a support. Come on up.
I apologize, Chair, members of the committee. Jonathan Norman, Norman, Nevada Coalition of Legal Service Providers. I appreciate Assemblyman Miller bringing this bill. And, you know, anytime you have a consumer protection and you're able to put teeth into it, I can't say Legal Aid Center would support that every time, but in this instance we do. I think having teeth in consumer protection is the way that you actually protect consumers. So I appreciate the bill and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. John Peel for the record from the Clark County Public Defender's Office. I'm testifying support as well. I would like to echo the comments of my colleague from Legal Aid. Oftentimes we have clients who are on the margins and sometimes they're living in their cars. Were the car to get towed, that would put them in a very hairy situation. But this bill also hits personally for me. Pre-law school, when I was living paycheck to paycheck, my car was registered, but I hadn't yet stuck the sticker on the license plate. That night, my car got towed. I woke up in the morning with no ride to work. I had to call in, so I lost a day's wages there. When I finally figured out where my car was at night, I went to the tow yard. They said, hey, if you want your car out tonight, you got to pay the night fee. And I said, I don't want to pay an extra fee. I'll just come back tomorrow and get my car then. And then I got back the next day and they're like, well, now you got your extra day fee. So it was even more expensive than had I just gotten it out that night. This bill is an important measure. I think it will really help people out and make sure that people aren't having the odds stacked against them when sometimes they're getting their house, which is their car, out of a tow truck yard, or their car that provides a pathway to work. I strongly urge its passage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Piero. Anyone else in support of this measure here in Carson City? BPS, will you check the phone lines for anyone in support?
To testify in support of Assembly Bill 303, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller, please press *6 to unmute your phone. You may begin.
Sophia Romero, Sophia Romero, Romero for the record, testifying in support. I would also like to echo what Mr. Norman and Mr. Piero said. This bill is very, very important. I would like to thank Assemblyman Miller for bringing this. As to why we need it, I feel like we have testimony on record from last session with AB 301, and we had put a lot of work into this, and we had talked to a lot of consumers who this was affecting their day-to-day life. Again, as Assemblyman Miller said, this is a cleanup bill, and everything that's currently in this bill is already in statute, save the teeth for the consumer protection issue, because this is continuing to be ongoing. So I would like to thank the committee for their time, and thank you all, and urge your support of this matter. Thanks.
BPS, next caller.
There are no other callers to testify in support at this time.
Thank you. Next, we'll hear testimony in opposition of AB 303. please come forward and fill up the chairs. Again, you'll have 2 minutes. Please clearly state your name for the record. And you may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. Lucas Valletta for the Nevada State Tow Association. We are in opposition. I think, frankly, we need to start out by taking on the notion that this bill is, that its purpose is to clarify AB 301. The bill is substantially different, I think, in terms of how it's written, in any case, than what was described. And it does represent a significant expansion of what AB 301 did. I think there's a lot of confusion about this provision of statute. And that's somewhat understandable because this particular provision has been amended each of the last 3 sessions. And now we're going on the 4th possibility of another amendment. It was also amended, I believe, 2 times before that since it's enacted. So at a high level, this section of statute does not just apply to tows from common interest communities or residential complexes. The first section of the statute makes it clear that this section is about non-consent tows from private property. There are individual sections of the statute that apply to residential complexes, but the overarching purpose of the statute is to establish a scheme to govern tows that are made by people other than the owner of the vehicle and other than law enforcement. So, for example, when we talk about the amended version of the bill and the hardship tariff language, that hardship tariff does not apply simply to tows from residential complexes. It would apply to all non-consent tows by private property owners. So, for example, if you had a vehicle parked in a school bus zone or a fire lane in front of a business, in any place where there's assigned parking, be it a residential complex, a small business, a large business, and a tow was being requested by the property owner of that business, the hardship tariff rule would apply. And so this is a very significant expansion of what AB 301 was about. AB 301 was about applying a hardship in cases where there were tows of vehicles that were unregistered because they were unregistered from residential complexes. That is what the industry worked with Assemblyman Miller on at that time, but that is not what this bill is about.
Mr. Folletta, you're now over your 2 minutes, if
Okay.
you would wrap.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll pass it on to my colleagues here.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Paul Enos. I'm the CEO of the Nevada Trucking Association, and we're here today to oppose AB 303. We've tried a lot in this body to find balance between your property owners, the vehicle owners, your tow operators, and we've done a lot to give the NTA teeth to be able to go after the bad tow operators, whether it's impounding the vehicles or impounding the illegal tow operators' vehicles, or even taking their license away. Every time you get something from the NTA, it could be a $10,000 fine. And if it's a repeated violation, you don't get to legally tow anymore. So there's a lot of teeth already in terms of how the NTA acts. I do appreciate the fact that it looks like the amendment fixes one of our biggest issues that we have, Amendment 1, which says you can charge for towing or storage, which tow operators, hey, they have financial challenges too, from the cost of diesel to labor to trucks. Pretty tremendous out there, and everything they do in terms of what they charge for these tows is regulated by the Nevada Transportation Authority. They can't deviate 1 penny from that. If they want to, they have to go through a process. They have to pay money. If they feel bad for somebody whose vehicle's been towed, it is a challenging process to get that deviation. When I look at Amendment 2 to the hardship tariff, and I do agree with Mr. Folletta on his points, because if your registration is expired, that does show financial difficulties. And a hardship tariff, I think, is appropriate there, which is why last session we agreed, hey, you're not supposed to tow for unregistered vehicles. And if somebody's doing that, the NTA has the teeth and the wherewithal to go after those folks. But what this amendment does is it gives people who are parking in a handicap spot, in somebody else's parking spot, in a fire lane, it gives them a discount if they meet those criteria. And I don't think that's what we want to do in this bill. I'm happy to work with the sponsor, happy to work with Mr. Miller, see what we can work out. But right now, this bill in Amendment 2 is untenable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Danny Thompson, representing Southern Nevada, Snap Tow in Henderson, Nevada. We want to thank Assemblyman Miller for meeting with us, and we agree with Mr. Enos's reference of Amendment 1. But I think this is an expansion to what Mr. Folletta said. You know, I have to tell you, if you're a property owner, a property manager, you have huge liability to manage that property. And without the ability to keep that property manageable, I mean, where if you have people, and I'll give you an example. I live in an apartment complex in Reno that I have a garage and I'm allowed one other space. I know there's a guy that lives next door to me that has 4 cars, and he's parking them all inside the facility. That's a violation of the rules. Now, if I were to turn that person in, I could have 2 of those cars towed legally because it's not for registration. There's no sign anywhere, but the property management team has the rule that you can only have 1 car in your garage and 1 car outside. That's an example of where a tow operator is going to come and tow that vehicle for the property owner for a good and valid reason. And so we're opposed to the bill as it's written for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in opposition here in Carson City? And when you're done, if you don't mind, if you would vacate to give room for whoever's coming up next, that would be great. You may begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon. Mark Hackman, Hackmann, with I3 Public Affairs, and we're representing Nevada Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association in opposition of AB 303 and specifically to Amendment 2. So it looks like this would be an expansion of the tariff program, which would lead to reduced towing fees. And our concern is that would lead to reduced response times or even situations where they wouldn't respond to a tow call. For our members that are gas stations, this would lead to a public safety issue where you would have a car that's parked with no driver and it's an unknown vehicle in close proximity to gasoline and diesel storage tanks. So for that reason, we're in opposition.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. Samantha Sato with Career Nevada on behalf of our client Copart. Copart specializes in the resale and remarketing of used, wholesale, and salvage title vehicles for a variety of sellers, including insurance companies, rental car companies, and local municipalities. We appreciate the bill sponsor and his willingness to work with us 24 hours before the scheduled bill hearing. We are here today in opposition to Assembly Bill 303. As written, the bill will lead to many challenges within the towing industry. And unfortunately, even with the conceptual amendment, we believe several challenges still remain. We again appreciate Assemblyman Miller's willingness to modify this proposal and look forward to continuing work with him. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee chair and members of the committee. Carrie Kramer on behalf of NAOP. We too are opposed to the bill as introduced. However, with the conceptual amendment, if it were to be adopted, we could move to a neutral position. Thank you.
Anyone else in opposition here in Carson City, please come forward and fill the chairs in. You may begin when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Michael Bombach. I am the president of the Nevada State Tow Association. I want to echo the comments. We are again opposed to AB 303. I want to echo the comments from Lucas and from Paul Enos. This bill is not simply a cleanup from last session. It's a pretty drastic expansion of authority. It was stated that this bill is only going to apply for private properties, for common interest communities and apartment complexes, and that's not true. This also applies to commercial properties. You can think Walmart distribution centers. You can think of gas stations, grocery stores, you name it. And there are vehicles that have a legal right to be towed that wouldn't qualify for the hardship tariff discount. Initially, the hardship tariff discount was implemented for registration violations only, and this bill as written now expands that authority to every single tow. So the Nevada Transportation Authority is responsible for regulating the rates that every tow car operator is allowed to charge. Those rates are determined based on our business expenses, which account for fuel, labor, insurance, new truck vehicle cost, tire replacement costs, maintenance costs, and all the like. and there's a very small margin for any kind of profit to be made. Now, any discount given off of a price set by the state is going to be a discount on the profit we can make. And in fact, the 30% discount that Mr. Miller was talking about is superior and above than the profit that we make on those tows. So it becomes a reverse hardship on the tow operators to offer the hardship discount. Now, on top of that, 2 years ago in the last session, the hardship tariff was created. We still have not received any information from the Nevada Transportation Authority on
Mr.
how.
Damas, you are now over your 2 minutes. If you would please wrap.
Okay,
Thank
just
you.
real quick.
Thank you.
The hardship tariff has not been defined by the Transportation Authority at this moment. There are reasons that need to be discussed more in depth, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Susan Zinzer. I own DNS Tow and have for 32 years. I would say that the expansion, I can overspeak everything that's been said today, and I am opposed to this bill. But truly, to hash over the details of all of this again just doesn't seem to hold enough weight. The weight is if you can't afford to register your car, that is a hardship. If you park on a fire hydrant or in a hospital loading zone, that's not. Towing should be the deterrent to stop that behavior. Because if in a residential or in an apartment complex, if they park in the wrong place and they get towed and they have to pay something, then they're not going to just drive back after that and park in the same place because they think they could. And the details of it is wary on this kind of behavior. Accountability should be the teeth, and towing is the teeth, in my opinion. Thank you.
Hi there, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. For the record, John Sandy, that's S-A-N-D-E, and it's John with an H. Here today on behalf of the Nevada State Apartment Association. I don't have a whole lot more to add than what's been said here. We feel that it's important to be able to safely and lawfully remove vehicles that are illegally parked, and I just wanted to put that on the record. Look forward to working with the Assemblyman. Apologize for not having reached out before this hearing, but I stand for any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sandy. Is there anyone else here in opposition to Assembly Bill 303 in Carson City? If you do have written comments and you did not have an opportunity to finish your comments, please feel free to leave them with the committee secretary, and we'll make sure that they get added into public record. Anyone in Las Vegas in opposition? I don't see any. BPS, will you see if there's anyone in opposition on the phone lines?
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Now we'll move into neutral. Is there anyone in neutral on this measure in Carson City? None in Las Vegas. BPS, anyone on the phone lines in neutral?
There are no callers at this time.
Thank you. Okay, that's it for Assembly Bill 303, so I will go ahead and close the hearing. Oh, pardon me. Assemblyman Miller, would you like to offer closing comments at this point?
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'd just like to just acknowledge or flag that when we're talking about the hardship tariff program, we are talking about folks who are already 200% below the poverty line. These are folks that are financially in a difficult situation. And when we know that a lot of times towing, non-consent towing happens in communities where poor folks live, excuse my language, my frankness, then we can understand why there's a concern about the decrease in income, because we are towing in places where folks are financially struggling. So it's going to hit your pockets if that's where you focus, and then there is a hardship tariff program. I completely understand that. But I thank everyone for their comments. Some things they clarified even more for me than I could have, so that was greatly appreciated in some cases. But at the end of the day, I want to thank everyone for your time and urge your support of this important bill.
Thank you. Now we will close the bill hearing for Assembly Bill 303, and officially I will turn the gavel back over to our chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice Chair. It's good to be back. Appreciate you running that hearing. We do have one other bill on our agenda, and look forward to hearing from you at the testimony table. So with that, I will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 290, which revises provisions governing motor vehicles. We'll welcome the Vice Chair. Take your time.
Thank you, Chair Watts, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tracy Brown May. I am the Assemblywoman that represents Assembly District 42 in Clark County. Thank you so much for allowing the opportunity to present this bill today, Assembly Bill 290. As you will see by reviewing the bill material, it creates a statutory process for an auto dealer to unwind the sale, where a dealer and a purchaser enter into a written return agreement to cancel a sale, and the dealer is responsible for returning all of the money, the taxes, the fees, the purchaser, the lender. It updates Nevada revised statutes. Today we'll be working off of a conceptual amendment that you have delivered to you in hard copy. This is the full color version. Should be on your desk. The partners have been working in close quarters with the Department of Motor Vehicles, as well as the Franchise Dealers Association and other interested parties in order to make sure that we are well on the road to creating a good policy that's going to help to improve consumer protections, dealer protections, and work cooperatively with the Department of Motor Vehicles to be able to turn around registrations in a timely fashion. So additionally, one of the benefits in the advent of the digital marketing that's used for vehicle transactions is that it provides for a safer marketplace. So alongside me today is Tony Hall. He's the Senior Manager of Government Affairs at Carvana. Carvana, it was one of the proponents that started this bill, as they are in a digital marketplace and have really taken that business model to a whole new level to continue to expand the way we purchase vehicles in a safe fashion, in particular here in Nevada. There is one vehicle vending machine in southern Nevada. So I'm sure that you may have seen it, a vehicle vending machine. Ooh, we do have a car purchaser, so that's really good. And I certainly want to respect your time and energy, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to my counterpart, Mr. Hall, and he can walk us through some of the history, why we're here, and then what the conversation is.
Thank you. Chair Watts, Vice Chair Brown May, and members of the committee. My name is Tony Hall, Senior Government Affairs Manager at Carvana, and I'm here today presenting AB 290 with Assemblywoman Brown May. Prior to my time at Carvana, I did work for the Texas Department of Motor Vehicles for 10.5 years, where I worked on supporting and implementing similar legislation as in AB 290. I would like to note that I've been practicing saying Nevada, so I say that correctly. Our in-state lobbying team has given me quite a hard time about my pronunciation on that, so if you notice I get quiet before I say the word Nevada, it's because I'm trying to make sure I pronounce it correctly, so please humor me. Founded in 2012, Carvana is a Fortune 500 e-commerce platform that provides vehicle purchasers alternatives to the traditional purchasing process. By providing purchasers with the option of purchasing a vehicle online from the comfort of their home, Carvana allows the purchaser to select, purchase, and have their vehicle delivered directly to their door. To date, over 18,500 Nevadans have taken advantage of the Carvana experience. I appreciate the opportunity to take a moment to walk you through the sections of this bill to summarize the goal of each. The goal of Section 1 of the bill, as reflected in the conceptual amendment, is to create a transparent and legal statutory process whereby a motor vehicle can be treated like most other consumer products. The conceptual amendment reflects feedback from the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Department of Taxation, and the Franchise Auto Dealers Association. Section 1 would provide an option allowing, Section 1 would provide an option following the sale of a vehicle by a Nevada licensed dealer during which the dealer and the purchaser can rescind the sale of that motor vehicle. If this option is exercised, the dealer and the purchaser would enter into a written return agreement to cancel the sale, and the dealer would be responsible for essentially making the consumer or any lenders whole by returning all the monies back to them. We believe it provides Nevada customers the comfort to quickly re-enter the vehicle market to purchase a vehicle either from us, another dealer, or another individual. Given the importance of a vehicle for a person's daily functioning, whether that's getting to and from work or for family needs, ensuring consumers receive their refund in a timely manner is significant not only to Carvana but to Nevadans. Following the rescission, if the transfer of ownership has already been processed by the department, or the dealer requires a new title for the purposes of retailing the vehicle, the dealer may make a request to the department to obtain a title in the name of the dealership. This bill specifies that the department must process the transfer to the dealer's name within 7 days for an expedited request, accompanied by the expedited processing fee. This is to ensure the dealer has a valid ownership document that they can use to subsequently retail that vehicle to another purchaser. We estimate about 10 Carvana retail transactions per month could be subject to this provision, and about 4 to 6 per year would actually need to exercise the option of making the request to the Department of Motor Vehicles for that new title. However, this provision certainly could be used by other licensed Nevada dealers. While obtaining a new title from the department is not necessarily necessary in all canceled sale situations, when it is, it can significantly reduce the pain and the cost associated with undoing those sales. Sections 2 and 3 of the bill are just conforming changes. And then finally, Section 4 of the bill is a cleanup to existing state law to match federal regulations that changed at the beginning of 2020. The federal odometer disclosure requirements were amended in 2019 and effective on January 1st, 2020. And one of the changes in the federal requirements increased the age of vehicles before those vehicles would be exempt from odometer disclosure requirements. The change increased the exemption from 10 years to 20 years while making the increase incremental year by year. What that means is that model vehicles 2011 or newer stopped being exempt in 2020 until they reach 20 years of age, which will obviously happen in 2031. This increases the age where vehicle transfers must have an odometer disclosure with the intent of reducing odometer fraud. Again, these changes in Section 4 merely align Nevada law with the current federal guidelines. And I just have it on the record that Nevada already enforces that provision. Their website reflects the 20-year exemption. So again, this is just a cleanup. To conclude, Carvana will continue to work with the Department of Motor Vehicles to address any remaining concerns that they may have. As mentioned at the opening, I've worked for the Texas DMV, so I have great appreciation for the work that they do and respect the concerns that they may have, and Carvana appreciates their engagement thus far on this bill. Members, that concludes my prepared remarks, and again, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss AB 290, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. All right, we'll start with Assemblywoman Gallant. I'll put the list together.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious. It is getting more popular just to like buy a car online and it gets delivered. I have to say I did it not with Carvana, but you didn't have the car I wanted. Sorry. But you know that provision was in the contract where I had 30 days and I could return it. I'm curious in terms of the consumer, right? Is it a used car? Is it still a new car? How is that disclosed to the consumer? Do you have a subcategory?
For the record, Tony Hall, appreciate the question. Disappointed you didn't buy a vehicle from us, but maybe the next time we have one for you. So to answer your specific question, the bill does specify in the case of a new vehicle, that vehicle is considered to have been subject to a retail sale that should be disclosed to a subsequent purchaser. For us personally, right, we just deal with used vehicles. A used vehicle is a used vehicle at that point. So I don't know if that specifically addressed your question or not.
But if you, Tracy Brown May for the record. Just to follow up on that, so it's really less about the vehicle sale for you, for the purchaser, right? It's about you having the ability through a car dealer to return your vehicle in 30 days, but it's about the car dealer being able to rescind the vehicle's sales through the DMV. So that's really the part. So we have car dealers that have taken on the responsibility of being able to return a vehicle within 30 days, the time frame of 30 days. So you have good consumer protections. But then we have to unwind the deal through the Department of Motor Vehicles with regard to the titling of that vehicle, right? So that's the piece that we're working on in this bill in particular.
Okay. I guess I was concerned about the next consumer.
Tony Hall. So again, the bill does stipulate that if it is a new vehicle that has been subject to a retail sale, merely undoing it doesn't roll back the fact that it's been subject to a prior retail sale. And the reason why that particular piece would be important is a lot of times that first retail sale starts to trigger things like warranty agreements and service agreements. So that information would be necessary to be disclosed. To kind of go back to your prior comment, it is not uncommon for dealers to offer basically return periods. Many dealers do, and we're not unique in that situation. And it kind of varies. What the bill is trying to do is make that statutorily blessed, so you're not really working in these gray areas or trying to interpret statute to kind of fit allowances, and then also to close that back end piece, which is, particularly with the way Carvana do business, we do business all across the country. While there may be a certain process in place in Nevada where a dealer can cross through a transfer on the back of a title and say, hey, we backed out that sale, and the DMV here will accept that. That doesn't work in like a California or a Texas or potentially other states where they're going to look and say, no, that sale took place. You can't just cross through the back of that, because then that starts to look like fishy things may be going on or steps were skipped. So having a mechanism to get just a clean title back that we can use to retail someplace else is really that missing piece we're also trying to close. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblyman Miller. Then we'll go to Assemblywoman Kasama. Then we'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all. Thank you for the bill. At the risk of not giving a commercial here, I actually have gone through the process of purchasing a car through the coming down and doing the vending machine thing. That was pretty cool. But I returned that vehicle. And so I actually have dealt a bit with this process. It was fairly easy. It really was very easy to do. So I'm curious if you can kind of shed some light on how this, I guess, impacts the process with DMV, because I imagine, like you mentioned, the car starts to go through a process of being sold, and I imagine that's where the gray area is whether the car has actually been sold or not, and how many owners have to be reported and all that kind of stuff. So if you can dive into how this works out with the DMV, that would be great.
Tony Hall, thank you. I appreciate the question. So the unwind process varies state by state. Typically, the way it can be handled, particularly in a state with like Nevada, where there's a long lead time before things have to get reported to the DMV, is dealers sit on the paperwork until they're pretty sure the customer's not going to return the vehicle. And then there are certain processes that the DMV has in place where they can strike through and they attach a document to it that kind of explains what goes on. And that works well within the state of Nevada. Where things get challenged, I alluded to this on the prior questions, when you start moving vehicles across state lines, which is our entire business model, to unwind a sale and then to get a clean ownership document back can be immensely burdensome administratively. Sometimes customers are not happy. They do not want to cooperate with you. There may be lien holders that are involved in that situation. Lien holders can often take a very long time to release security interests in that. Depending on the timing, the DMV may or may not yet have processed the work. Currently, depreciation is about $26 a day for a vehicle. There was a situation specifically that Carvana dealt with where we were stuck with a vehicle for close to 18 months that we could not move because we could not get a legal ownership document back merely from this process of not having a easy way to get ownership back into Carvana's name following the rescission process. So will this solve every single problem, every single scenario? It's hard to say that the answer to that would be yes, but it lessens the burden and it provides an avenue for a dealer that doesn't exist today, and it makes it clear in statute that a dealer can offer a consumer the option to return a vehicle, and that customer would then be entitled to actually get all of their money back that they paid. Appreciate the question.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. So in the Section 1, you're removing not later than 30 days. And so is that going back to the dealer and their contract, how much time you have to return the vehicle? So some people might have 30 days, some might have 60, 15. Is that why we're removing that there?
For the record, Tony Hall, appreciate the question. So in our discussions with the DMV and the Dealer Association yesterday, actually, it was brought to light that there really is not a statutory limit right now that it can really be done at any time. And we didn't want to take away this open window where somebody can return a vehicle away from maybe the current process that's kind of working in a gray area away. So we felt like the best thing to do was just kind of eliminate that strict window. And to your point, dealers' return windows can vary, and trying to pick the right one just didn't seem like it was ideal with the way business happens today in Nevada.
Great. May I have another question? The other question I had, so if the purchaser, because you're talking about all the fees and everything have to be returned, but if the purchaser just changes their mind and you have some cost with DMV, now this is to have a 7-day expedited so you can get a title back. Does the buyer still pay for those some of the fees just because they changed their mind?
Tony Hall, for the record, again, thank you for the question. So to answer specifically, the way the bill is structured is the customer's made whole on that transaction. They get all their money back. The way the process works in Nevada is purchasers register their own vehicles. There's already a registration credit process in place, so this bill doesn't address that. There's already a sales tax process in place where dealers can offset the sales tax that's been paid. If payment has already been made to the Department of Motor Vehicles for processing the title transfer, we did not ask for this bill to contemplate returning those fees back to the DMV for 2 reasons. One, the state has already done work, and just from a purely ethical standpoint, didn't feel like the state shouldn't be compensated for that work. And 2, we didn't want to add an extra administrative burden to the DMV to request that they return that fee, which, in the grand scheme of things is relatively novel when you're talking about, tens of thousands of dollars in value of a vehicle. So yeah.
Right, so these are all the dealer fees. All right,
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Dickman, then we'll go to Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just want to make sure that this is I mean, this has to be a mutual agreement between the buyer and the seller, right? I mean.
For the record, Tony Hall, yes, absolutely. The very first sentence in that bill is it's a may. That a dealer does not have to offer this provision, so there's no requirement that they do. So they can, and it would obviously have to be an agreement between the parties involved to undo that sale.
Just wanted to make sure that was clear, but I mean, can't we already do everything that's in this bill?
So that has been suggested by the DMV, Tony Hall, for the record, that has been suggested by the DMV that some of these things may already be allowed, and they already have process in place to do that. The intent of the bill is to ensure that that is clear and memorialized in statute. We'll continue to work with the DMV through that process to, see if there's other alternatives to do that may be simpler.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Chair.
If I could just follow up on that, Chair. We may have members of the DMV that will be able to answer some of those questions in neutral, as there's been a lot of work done with the Nevada Department of Motor Vehicles relative to that.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Miller.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing this presentation forward. I was just wondering, I have a more generalized question. If you could just explain to us what the impact or the effect is on all car dealers in general?
Tony Hall, thank you for the question. Again, it's going to be up to each dealer to determine whether they're going to offer these types of opportunities to return vehicles. That business model may work for some and not others. Obviously, speaking for Carvana, we have a 7-day money-back guarantee. No questions asked. You get your money back. You move on. Other dealers have very similar provisions. Other large national retailers also offer them at varying lengths. The way we look at this bill is this is optional. So each dealer can make the determination of whether they want to exercise the option to offer a return agreement. They can elect whether or not they want to make that application to the department to get that title in their name. They may or may not need it. It may be something that is, heightened by the sense of the way we do business, that we may exercise that more than maybe a traditional Nevada dealer. But that's not to say that, another dealer that does more business across state lines or borders, maybe a California, Arizona, where they have a lot of cross-state customers, may not also need to take advantage of these opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you so much for the presentation. We will move on to testimony on this bill. Anyone wishing to provide testimony in support, please come forward. All right. Well, seeing none in Carson City, seeing none in Las Vegas, BPS, can we see if we have anyone wishing to provide testimony in support of Assembly Bill 290 by phone?
Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. With that, we'll move to testimony in opposition of Assembly Bill 290. Seeing none here, seeing none in Vegas. BPS, has anyone joined us by phone?
Chair, there are no callers at this time.
Thank you. And finally, we'll move to testimony in neutral on Assembly Bill 290. All right, we'll begin with Mr. McKay here. Then I believe we have Mr. Decker down south, and we'll take it from there.
Hi, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Andrew McKay, I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada Franchise Auto Dealers Association. I will simply say this, pardon me, if I state anything that Mr. Decker may be intending to put on the record, that's entirely coincidental, and I apologize in advance on that. I think what I'll do is just put some really brief context to this. You'd probably rather hear from him than me anyway. First off, thanks to Carvana and the bill sponsor for reaching out. The initial draft, we had some concerns, actually, perhaps questions more than anything, with respect to the 30-day provision, but then particularly there was a provision in there that in listening to DMV, they would be compelled to issue a title within 7 days. And that caused us some concerns. And the reason being is, and you will hear from Mr. Decker, I'm certain on this, is that right now the time for DMV to produce a title now is at 38 days. What does that mean in the real world? And let me put some context to it. Just last week I spoke to a dealer. Title has not been provided on a new sale transaction, and as a result, the lien holder is asking, where's the proof that I got collateral on this loan? Didn't have it, and then as a result, the dealer had to buy the deal back. Translation, they now own it. And those are expensive. Those are really, really, average price of a vehicle is now $46,000, $47,000. So when we found out that this could potentially put Carvana to the front of the list or transactions like that, that caused us some serious concerns. It's been addressed. And to be very clear to the committee on this, this is a process that takes place today. It has, I don't want to necessarily say it's frequent, but it does occur, where there can be a rescission on a deal for various reasons. And again, this does not interfere with the specific agreement between be it one of my members, a new car dealer, or any other used dealer in the state of Nevada. Whatever those are, this does not disturb that. So again, in closing, just really appreciate not only the DMV for some very good insight on the process and how to impact them, but also to the beer sponsor, to the bill sponsor for reaching out, and then Carvana. They were great to work with. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. The beer sponsor comes a little bit later. Seeing no one else here in Carson City, whenever you're ready, Mr. Decker.
Good afternoon, Chair Watts, Vice Chair Brown May, committee members. I am J.D. Decker. I'm the Chief of the Enforcement Division for DMV, here to testify in neutral on AB 290. The department appreciates Carvana working with us to amend language in the bill so far so that it could be something that the department could apply generally to other dealers as well as not interfering with existing law. However, we would like to point out that the provisions in this bill for acquiring title in the dealer's name currently exist in NRS 482, where they are not tied to a rescission. However, nor do they impede or prohibit Carvana from offering rescission as part of their business model. In existing law, there currently are no obstacles, or on the other side, there are no mandates that a dealer can or shouldn't or may offer a rescission. It's complete. Assemblywoman Dickman hit on it with her question. It is absolutely currently allowed under existing law. Title applications can be submitted by a dealer in the dealer's name currently without any additional legislation. The department is working on a policy guide to satisfy Carvana's concerns that our processing of those rescissions might not be consistently applied in the future. But overall, we have concerns regarding legislating department processing times. Those hinge on, at any given moment, on staffing problems, which are subject to more complex solutions like pay and recruiting, to economic conditions outside our control like auto sales volume between new and used vehicles, both dealer and private parties across the state. In addition, we have an obligation to protect the interests of consumers and other dealer licensees in Nevada who will also be subject to the provisions of the bill, not just Carvana. And I would close by saying that I am relatively certain that the 18-month vehicle that was mentioned by Mr. Hall did not occur in Nevada. In fact, I think that most of those examples did not occur in Nevada, and the department initially was worried, as Mr. McKay said, about being compelled to issue a clean title regardless of the completeness of the title application. Mr. Hall mentioned in the instance that a lien holder had not released a lien on a vehicle. Those situations today, at this point with the bill language, would still not result in a title being issued regardless of the passage of this bill if the title application was not complete. I'm happy to answer any of the committee's questions on behalf of the department. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions for the department? All right, seeing none, thank you for providing that feedback. It sounds like you've been engaged with the bill sponsor, and look forward to that continuing, and we'll see where this goes. Seeing no one else in Las Vegas at this time, BPS, do we have anyone wishing to provide testimony in the neutral position on AB 290 by phone?
There are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you. Vice Chair, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Thank you, Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate your time and attention today while we brought this very important measure. There are a number of issues at play here. I want to be very clear that this does not just apply to Carvana. While this is the company that brought the idea for this bill forward, that the rescission for a vehicle in a timely fashion in Nevada really is of concern. And how do we help both of our consumers and our car dealers to be able to do that in a timely manner. I understand that we have a lot of issues relative to staffing throughout the state. However, that should not really be a consideration relative to policy codified in statute. And so we'll continue to work with the DMV to find a common ground where we can make sure that we have good processes that help our consumers and our car dealers to be able to effectuate the sale of a vehicle and subsequent return. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you very much. Look forward to staying updated on those activities. With that, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 290. Members, that brings us to the last item on our agenda today, which is public comment. Again, we'll ask anyone wishing to provide public comment to limit their remarks to 2 minutes. With that, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment either here in Carson City or in Las Vegas? Seeing none at this time, BPS, do we have anyone wishing to provide public comment by phone?
The public line is open and working, and there are no callers at this time.
All right, thank you. That concludes our business for today. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, March 23rd at 1:30 p.m. We are adjourned.